Hi, welcome to another edition of 1 in 15. And as ever, I'm going to let my guests introduce themselves.
Hey everyone, I'm Nishe Patel. I'm an integrative coach and trainer. Essentially what that means is that I take lots of different ideas, different tools, different ways of thinking, and bring them all together to work with my clients to support them as best as I can.
Brilliant, Nish, and it's really, really great to have you, to have this chat. As you know, we've been talking to people about what's the one thing that's really dominating their thinking at this peculiar time that we're all living and negotiating. What's that one thing for you?
I think the major thing that seems to keep coming up in different ways to me is this sense of overwhelm. It's a bit of and I suspect loads of people experience this, and it's something that I've spoken to a lot of people about. That overwhelm at the start of COVID,
Sure.
When we were all kind of there going, what do I do? Must do something. Everyone's making bread, everyone's doing something. And it sort of petered away for me. And then it's recently come back again.
Yeah.
Because I found the space and I started going out and doing things, started signing up to courses. And now I'm like, oh, wait a second. Maybe I've signed up to too much here.
Sure.
So definitely in the second wave of that one.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting you say that, because, as a coach as well, I've had formal and informal conversations with people, and that, I think that trend's definitely there. It's really, really interesting how people have reacted to that feeling of overwhelm. So I've got some friends who feel overwhelmed, but their way to try and fix it seems to be by trying to do more and hope that the overwhelm goes away. And other people who've just had to just stop everything to cope with that. And obviously, one of my areas of interest and specialism is well-being, and so I'm really interested in trying to help people negotiate that feeling, acknowledge where they feel overwhelmed, acknowledge where they've got opportunities to do stuff, and kind of give themselves some love and some appreciation when they can't.
Yeah, and I think that, and it's almost in the way that you're describing it, and it's what I experienced was it's so much in the head.
Yeah.
So when I had my feeling of overwhelm, it was this overthinking. There's I've got to do this, I've got to do that. There's all of this going on, and it's that recognition that overwhelm is actually an experience of feeling.
Yeah.
So rather than trying to process it logically, what I now do is I sink into it and process the feeling of it, and that in itself is quite interesting.
Sure.
Because for me, and everyone's got a slightly different experience, I reckon, but for me, overwhelm is it's made up in the way that it comes across. It's made up of lots of different things, all bubbling away, and it's this overwhelm. If you think about it, it's an entity, doesn't know how to cope.
Yeah.
So it's almost, what I try to do is pick it apart and see what it's made up of.
Yeah.
To then I've actually got something to work with.
Yeah, I mean, that makes an awful lot of sense, because for me, what you're describing there is anxiety. And anxiety is often where we feel overwhelmed. There's too many things that we're trying to juggle, too many decisions, and of course we're living in a overused phrase, but an unprecedented time. This global pandemic, everything that we've been used to doing has stopped or changed dramatically in some way. And we've got legitimate reasons to be anxious. We've got health worries, we've got financial concerns, we're really, really nervous about our neighbours and our family friends who are vulnerable, all these kind of things. And of course, what anxiety does is it makes us feel overwhelmed. We have too many things going on. And we know as we know, if we were helping somebody else, we would know what to do. And it's what you've described. It would be to go, take the big problem, break it down into bite-sized things, tackle some of them, put the others down until you've coped with some. But when it's all on top of us at the same time, it's really, really hard to do that, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's where we get a little bit lost in it. Like, we get caught up in that moment, that feeling, that sensation, and we do forget how quickly things changed. And how much more isolated we are, even though we've got all these conversations online. That's not the same. And how our world suddenly shrunk, and none of it was our choosing. And I think that's one of the hardest things for all of this, is accepting that we're now in a situation that we didn't choose, but we are now choosing to work with it, because that's what's important for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, and that again, that's really, I've said this in a couple of other conversations, but one of my personal reflections is that my own kind of history with anxiety and depression has in a weird way set me up quite well for this time, because I know that sometimes external things can really trigger me. And I know some, you know, like when I'm not well, I know that I'll go to bed one version of me and I don't know what version of me is going to wake up the next day. So I've lived for 5-10 years now in a state where I can't make too many long-term decisions with any like real certainty. They can be hoped for outcomes, but I can't guarantee them, which actually, of course, is how we all have lived, regardless of our mental health state. But this pandemic has really highlighted that kind of the illusion of control that we think we've had, and now we can't pretend we had. All these things, these decisions that we've decided must, you know, the outcome must be this, is suddenly much more ethereal or impossible to gauge.
Yeah, it's incredibly, oh God, it's challenging, isn't it? Because it's almost like your world's been turned upside down. You have an opportunity to do something with it, but there's such fear and concern that what if you don't get it right? What if it doesn't work out? What does that mean for you and your family and your future? And it's tough, but I guess what you're saying in terms of having that background is actually, like you say, hugely valuable. Like I come from a place where I've had a mental illness, I had a mood disorder that was quite significant. It played out for about 20 years, significant. But it wasn't until I started talking about it that I suddenly realized that so many people out there have the same type of experience or have experienced something. And I think this is similar, is that people are forgetting that they're not the only ones in this. Like, if you're not feeling great, you're pretty much guaranteed someone nearby possibly isn't feeling great as well.
Yeah.
And the conversation and sharing that is likely to alleviate it, because at least then you know that it's not just you.
Absolutely. I mean, there's this weird thing, isn't it, psychologically, where, you know, it's that, you know, a problem shared is a problem halved thing, where just talking about something hasn't solved it, hasn't made dealing with it any kind of easier on a pragmatic level, perhaps, but the weight of it somehow shifts. You know, I was chatting to somebody the other day who was in quite a bad place, and he was telling me how he'd had a conversation the day before that made him feel better, and it was with somebody else, a friend of his, who was also in a bad place. And they both came away with this kind of feeling of, well, he's also dealing with stuff. It's not the same stuff I'm dealing with, but I'm just, by listening to him, I've helped him, and certainly he listening to me has helped. And that kind of weight having shared off. When one of my previous jobs, I was chaplain in a secondary school. One of the first things I said when I started that to the staff team was, anxiety and depression is part of my history. So if people, you know, having any issues with that, I'm a safe person to talk to about it. And on the back of that, the first kind of 2 or 3 weeks, about 10 people came up to me saying either they had issues, some of them undiagnosed, or they were caring for people with these issues. And just that relief of going, I'm not, as you said, I'm not the only one. And in the pandemic, we're all in the same boat. You know, we've got different resources to cope with it, to be sure. Our resilience levels are different, to be sure. But feeling anxious, feeling overwhelmed, entirely understandable and legitimate.
Yeah. And I think I guess that's the thing that I struggled with most with my mood disorder, was that the experience of it was, that's what I'm experiencing, but I almost couldn't accept it.
Yeah.
Like, I live a charmed life. I really do, right? Like, I've got very little to worry about. In fact, nothing to worry about. My family's well, my friends are well. I don't have money worries. I don't have to be doing anything particular.
Sure.
I have a charmed life, and I'm well cared for and well loved. Yet I'm still experiencing this, and it's almost like, well, what right do I have to feel this way when so many people are having it so much harder? And I think that was the biggest thing I had to overcome, was that it wasn't that it was wrong to feel the way I was feeling. It was just, that's what I was feeling.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Everyone has different experiences. Everyone has different lives. Different people cope in different ways, like you said. But if what I feel is what I feel, that's the thing I have to accept. It doesn't matter where it came from.
No, exactly. And that, I think that's the thing you've introduced there is really, really crucial, because that's, I think, one of the things that trips us up so often as a human race is that we compare our situation to other people always unfavorably. So we go, oh, I'm not feeling great. Maybe I've got quite a severe mental health issue or physical issue, but I can see somebody else who's worse off than me. And therefore, what right do I have to feel what I feel? Whereas actually what you're feeling is what you're feeling, you know, and for some of us, recognizing that might be the start of feeling better anyway. For others of us, going to have some medical intervention or therapeutic intervention might be what we need, but it's not all internal or it's not all external factors that have got us to that place. So it's really important, if anyone is listening to this who's struggling, we're not saying everyone's struggling, therefore it's okay to struggle and you have to sit there in your struggle. What we're saying is, there are legitimate reasons, external factors for struggling at the moment, but absolutely spend time with people, with yourself and with people you trust, to work out whether you need other interventions. Because if you do, then please get them.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing. Was I knew I had this mood disorder for a very long time. I understood that's what I had. It took me so long to seek help, because the messages I was getting from other people was that that's not something I needed.
Yeah.
Or that I was coping really well. And that's lovely to hear. And it's great to know you've got support people recognizing that you've got a handle on this. But actually, sometimes we need that independent person who we can talk it out with, but also has the skills to support. And I think we sometimes, yes, a problem shared is a problem halved. Yeah, absolutely, talk to people, but go beyond that if you need it, definitely.
Yeah. And be wise with who you do share it with, you know. So I had absolutely, when I was coming to terms with the fact that I had clinical depression, there were some people I talked to about who probably mostly, I mean, I'm surrounded by great, lovely people, but some people out of the best heart were saying the equivalent of pull your socks up, you know, just think yourself better. And of course, one of the weird things, particularly with depression, is it's both true and completely untrue that you have to fix yourself. You know, you are the only one who can get better, but you spend so much of the time in a place where you're incapable. You just don't have any resources to draw on. So actually, for me and for a lot of other people, not everyone with depression, but a lot of other people I know with depression, you have to come to a point where you recognize your helplessness in order to find the resources internally and externally to get help. But again, so for me, the first time I spoke to the doctor about it was, you know, I went to the doctor feeling overwhelmed, feeling broken, feeling, you know, weird and useless. But just the doctor going, oh no, you probably have got something. We're going to take this seriously. I remember walking out of that, not being cured at all, knowing there was a lot of work to do. But I walked out of the surgery feeling so much better, because it wasn't just my problem to carry anymore. Somebody else was taking it seriously with me and for me.
Yeah, and I remember that moment as well. I remember I'd almost done a self-diagnosis because I didn't quite get it, and it was an unusual thing. We eventually agreed that it was possibly cyclothymia, which is highs and lows, but because they weren't extreme, it was almost like it didn't exist. It was just, that was what I lived with. And what was fascinating for me, and it was not until I think my 30s that I realized that some people don't have any of this.
Yeah.
I was there going, how are these people coping if they're going through what I'm going through? What have they got that I haven't got? And I suddenly realized that some people out there don't have this.
Yeah.
And it's almost like we need those people alongside us to be the allies in the same way they are when it comes with everything else they can see. So gender, with race, you need the mental wellness allies as well.
Absolutely.
Who don't experience it, but can go, I get that what you're going through is tough for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, being I mean, again, it comes back to what we were saying earlier, and we are pretty much out of time. I've done that thing where I've not looked at the time because I've got so engrossed in the conversation. but yeah, having somebody around us who legitimizes what we're going through without making excuses for it, without telling us how we can fix it, or a time scale that we must do it in, or and certainly without going, and this is why it's your fault, but somebody's going, okay, this is the struggle that you're going through. I recognize and support that. I want you to not go through that struggle, but I recognize that's the struggle you're going through. That's the kind of ally that we need. And normally in these conversations, we try and end up on what is the hope? So in less than 30 seconds, I think we've probably identified some of it anyway, but what is your hope out of this situation?
I guess for me, it's that people, if they haven't already, start to accept that it's tough. It's not an easy ride, and there are highs and lows through this, and that they find their people to talk to.
Yeah.
Whether they're allies or their friends or whoever it is, that they have someone to go to where they can be honest about what's going on for them and have someone just listen.
Yeah, that's perfect. And if we can all find that, regardless of what we're struggling with, then everything's just a little bit more possible, isn't it? Yeah. Nishe, that's great. Thank you so much for your time today. You've been a fantastic guest. And like so many of my other guests, I want to have another hour conversation with you about this stuff, because there's so much important stuff here. But our time is up today. So thank you very much for your time. Bless you.
Lovely. Thank you so much.